My definition of discipline is doing things that you don't like doing, but doing them consistently because they are important. So I would say the concept of that everything that you are experiencing is a perception. It's not reality because it's your perception. That concept is very powerful in my opinion.
Welcome back, my dear listeners. This is yet another episode on Inspire Someone Today. How many of us growing up would have been shy, not knowing what to do, but nevertheless go about through the motions of school life, adult life, and then accomplish something that we had not dreamt of? And accomplish not just like anything else, but in a much big way, large way. One such individual joining us today has gone through that journey, has been kind enough, gracious enough to kind of join us and walk us through his journey. But what struck me profiling him was this statement that he has, which is so profound and yet so simple. It goes like this: meeting good people is luck, keeping them with you is a skill. How true. On that note, it's my absolute joy and pleasure to welcome Chirantan on this episode of Inspire Someone Today. Welcome, Chirantan.
Thank you, Srikanth. Thank you for inviting.
So that was a great line, Chirantan, that you have coined. And another big belief that you have is give us gain philosophy. Maybe we can start from this. Maybe we can start with the story of the boy from Bal Mohan Vidya Mandir finding his foot in the sand dunes of Dubai. How did this all begin, and what's the story behind the story, Chiranta?
I think there's one word for it, destiny. So just to give the context, born and brought up in Mumbai. I'm born and brought up in Mumbai. Finished my mechanical engineering and MBA from Pune Symbiosis. And I was looking out for a job. So maybe it was my destiny that I couldn't get any job. So the bottleneck was I was not able to clear any group discussions. I was clearing the interview stage, but I was not passing the group discussion. And so almost all the campus interviews or the interviews lined up after the campus interviews finished I didn't get the job. So I was desperately looking out for a job, and my parents were also getting very anxious that a graduate and a postgraduate son is just lying on the sofa and watching TV all day. That used to be cable TV then. And everybody in the house was very anxious about it. And an opportunity came where placement consultant told me that there is a job in Dubai and I hope you have your passport. I said, I don't have the passport, but let me not tell him that now. Let me at least go and see whether I get accepted or not. So I said, okay. And this is how I went for an interview, but there was a slight condition there in the interview. He said, we have 20 people lined up. If any one of them is absent, I will slot you in. So be there at the Oberoi Hotel since morning and stay there for a whole day, praying that somebody is absent so that I can get to go for the interview. So I went there early. First thing in the morning, I have the habit of going early. Reached there at 7:30 in the morning, and the guy who was interviewing was having coffee in the coffee shop. He saw me. He was free. I was free. So he interviewed me first. I got the job and the other 20 couldn't. That's destiny.
Well, they say time reveals all things. And in your journey, like I said, you started off as a shy boy on the lookout for a job. And here in Dubai, you not only landed a job, looking back, has it been 2 decades now? Looking back into 2 decades from being an employee to an employer now.
I think again, God has been great. The journey has been fantastic. Dubai has been fantastic to people who have lived in Dubai. They know that the economy is the overall business environment is very supportive. So definitely that helps.
For somebody who has taken this leap of faith, wanting to do this, it hasn't been easy, right? You had to make your own changes. You had to kind of challenge from where you were to what you wanted to be. What has been some of those changes? What did you kind of change as an individual? What skills did you have to pick up as you kind of landed your job in Dubai?
I think through the journey of the job, as well as after leaving the job after 5 years, getting into your own business, if I look back, the skill sets that I really had to acquire was people skills. Because believing in that you can't achieve anything alone and you're always going to be surrounded by people and you need their help in your journey wherever you're going. So I would say, if I have to articulate it, I would say learning how to have enrolling conversations into your goals, into your journey, that definitely helps you a lot. That can accelerate the whole process. So I would name it as, in the people skills, under people skills subset, I would name that as learn to have enrolling conversations. Just to give you an example, is like, can you have conversations without using the words good, bad, right, wrong, should, must, have to? Because the moment you say, that's a very judgmental conversation. Or if you have to tell Srikant, you should do this, then your obviously approach is, why should I? In the same conversation, if I re-articulate it as, Srikant, this has worked for me. This has been my experience. If it has worked for me, it can work for you. Let's do it. The acceptance to that conversation is far, far higher than me saying, Srikant, you should do this. So that's what I mean by enrolling conversation. This is a very, very simple example of an enrolling conversation, and there are many more intricate and difficult situations that you have to handle. But one skill set that I would say I had to learn, and I think every entrepreneur ultimately learns in their journey, is enrolling conversations. Second would be discipline. But my definition of discipline is doing things that you don't like doing, but doing them consistently because they are important. Because if I like doing something and then I keep doing it consistently, it's a no-brainer. But if I don't like doing something, but it is important and that's why I keep doing it, that's discipline. And I think that is what we all had to shape ourselves. Enrolling conversations, I would say discipline. These are the two main learnings that I had to adopt during the journey.
And in this transition, I'm sure there were other elements of it, right? You're a newbie in a new country, new cultures, interacting with new set of people, so you have to develop new relationships. The work ethics, you're new, you got to prove yourself. So how did you manage all of these elements, the culture bit of it? What was your approach towards building relationships, your approach towards building that exemplary work ethics that you always stood out in whatever you did?
So all that comes under learning, because you learn how to build relationships with the right people. Because again, it's not just about building relationships, it's building relationships with the right people who can contribute, and stay away from people who are going to suck your energy. So it's not just building relationships, right? I think just being open, being observant, because when you enter a new country or a new company or a completely new environment, your first few months you're just observing what is the work ethic of this company, whether it is aligned with what my value systems are or not. If they are aligned with it, then you build on it. If they are not aligned, then you slightly start looking out for something else, because this is not aligned to your value system. So to summarize, wherever you go in your learning process, you just keep your eyes, ears open. As they say, God has given us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So if you use that proportionately, learning happens. So observing people constantly, making sure that you are surrounding yourself with people who are giving you energy and not sucking energy from you. You start building relationships and you start learning everything around that environment. That's been my experience. There is no rocket science. There is no one formula that works, but these basics always work. Having mentors, that's another thing. I've been very lucky that I've got people, who have always guided me. They told me, go right, don't go left in a critical situation. So that also helps a lot in the whole journey. So having mentors I'm a big fan of having the right mentors around you all the time.
And you're also big on the Rockefeller habits. You do mention about the Rockefeller habits. So again, for the benefit of all of our listeners, what is it all about and how has that helped you in your career?
So there is a book called Rockefeller Habits, basically, by a gentleman called Warren. The book says that, decide your priorities, what you want to do in the next quarter or next 6 months, next year, next week. So have the clarity about your priorities, collect the data related to priorities so you understand the gaps, that where you are and where you want to go. So have the data, really analyze the data, and then create a rhythm to keep the conversation alive in your team's mind. Because at the end of the day, every conversation expires in 48 hours. So You have your daily meetings, you have your weekly meetings, you have your monthly meetings. That is to keep the conversation alive about the priorities and the data. So these three things combined, that means having priorities, then having data related to the priorities, and having a rhythm to keep the conversation alive. These three things are Rockefeller habits, basically. And I have been regularly in my life, all my businesses that I'm involved in, there is a 8:50 morning huddle, there is a weekly huddle. We have quarterly priorities, we work on data, we monitor data, knowing your numbers. The combination of these three things, but in my experience, out of the three things, I love the last part, which is keeping the conversation alive in the team's mind, because half the job is done there, where you don't allow the conversation to die in your team's mind. I think keeping constant conversation, coming up with tools. So you have a situation room, your conference room has all the actionables planned there. So it's visible out there. It's there on the wall. It's there on your WhatsApp group. So different ways, different tools, which will keep the conversation alive in the minds of the team members who are involved in that task. Different ways, different people may have different tools, but as long as the end result is that the conversation is alive.
So, if you were to bring in the Rockefeller habits through an example, Chirantan, what would it be like?
Let's say in a sales job, if you're running a sales meeting, you come up with priorities that we want to have 50 active opportunities in your pipeline. And in the row, every month, we need to be working on 50 active opportunities, and say X is the average value of the opportunity that you want to work on, and Y is the closing ratio that you want to work on. Let's say these are your top priorities for that. So you go back historically and find out the data about how many active opportunities have we been working on in the last 6 months. Maybe there are 40, maybe there are 30. So you identify the gap. You look at your closing ratio, you look at your average. So you're collecting the data. So now you identified the gap. The conversation is about now bridging the gap. So then you say, okay, we'll have the daily morning huddle. There is a weekly meeting and there is a monthly meeting. The daily meeting will just be, we will be talking about what did we do yesterday, the wins from yesterday, what is the plan for today, and what bottlenecks we foresee for today, so that they don't become problems of future. Let's say that's my agenda for the daily huddle. The weekly meeting will have more detailed agenda of what actions are required to increase the closing ratio, a detailed conversation about impact on closing ratio, impact on average value of the deal. Maybe there is a training involved there, understanding where the lacking areas are so I can put more efforts into it. All these, whether it is a daily huddle or a weekly or a monthly, my goal is in the form of these conversations that I'm having, I'm constantly reminding the team of the gap. Because the moment we fill the gap, the priorities are going to be achieved.
So, focus on the gaps as you're kind of looking into all of these.
Conversation is all the time about the gap. That means the salesperson is never allowed to forget about the active opportunities, about the closing ratio, about the average value of the deal that they should be working on. Automatically, subconsciously, the sales team starts driving. I've seen so many results out of it just by maintaining that discipline or maintaining that rhythm of having these conversations about a focused point has a huge impact on the focus point, because all the energy is then divert towards that focus point. So this is an example of a sales department, and you can do it in every department. Have the priority, collect the data, identify the gap, and have a conversation focused on the gap. Daily, weekly, monthly, in different meetings, in a rhythmic format, so that the conversation is alive.
Nice, wonderful. And Chirantan, you have had this transition of being an employee to becoming an employer. In this transition, what kind of mindset change that one need to have? And would there be, I'm sure you would have had your moments of self-doubt. So what was the mindset shift that you did and how did you overcome the self-doubts?
So we all go through the self-doubt moments in life, because there are things which can be achieved very easily, and sometimes you see you're putting a lot of efforts, things are not being achieved, and you start doubting your own capability. Am I carved for these type of jobs, and am I carved for this goal? It comes in. My personal experiences, um, I always keep mentors around me, coaches around me. So I've always loved that environment of talking to people, being vulnerable in front of people. I have different groups of masterminds, forums that I'm part of, where I'm openly able to discuss my challenges and opportunities both, so that people across the table leverage their experiences for me. I think that's a great value. So whenever, especially when you are feeling depressed or when you are doubting yourself, people who have similar experiences, people who have gone through that journey, they share their experiences has tremendous value. It always, that day shall pass. They give you that confidence that that day shall pass. What you're doing is right. Just keep doing it. It's going to work because it will work for me. And somebody is endorsing it from their own experience. It's not book written by somebody. This is live people on the table who are willing to help. So the effort is in building the community around you who is willing to discuss things with you in a confidential environment without being judgmental about it. If you're able to develop that community around you, then handling these situations becomes easy, because then you're not, because almost all the entrepreneurs feel lonely at the top. You need people around you, trustworthy people around you who will never allow you to feel lonely. And I think that's been my sincere effort to have those people around me all the time in my life. And it has benefited. So I'm an ambassador.
Okay. So I think a couple of pieces that you mentioned here, the power of communities, uh, the power of
Mm.
being vulnerable, ability to have
Yeah.
mentors and coaches around you. And no matter how much you accomplish, it is still lonely at the top. And you're somebody who's doing multitude of things. You're managing different companies. You're focused on your own personal development. You're building communities. The question is, how do you make time for all of this? You're a busy entrepreneur yourself. How do you make time? What are the secrets behind finding that time and doing what you really enjoy doing?
I meet a lot of people who say, I don't have time. I find out is many of them, they don't have time because they want to do everything by themselves. So the delegation is the challenge really, or trusting other people to do their job is the challenge. So once we have to overcome that, and we have to trust others to do your job. And once you do that, a little bit extra time is on your hand. That's first part of, always I tell people, we say, I don't have time. I say, how much are you doing and how much is your team doing? If you want to sign every document and if you want to read every email, then even 24 hours are not enough.
True.
So what portion are you doing what you're good at, and rest all is dedicated, then you will have time, first point. Secondly, I think usage of calendar, this is really basic stuff I'm talking, but people just don't use the repeat function in the calendar. Any calendar has a function called repeat. In my case, I sit in the month of December and plan for the whole year what activities I do repeatedly. There are certain activities I do daily, certain I do weekly, certain I do monthly, certain I do quarterly. Right? That's the rhythm. I cut my hair once a month. It's a monthly frequency activity. I fill petrol in the vehicle once a week. That's a weekly activity. Correct? So I'm giving you absolutely layman's examples. But if you bring that to work, there are things that you do in a rhythm. You have your sales meeting weekly. You have your board meeting monthly. You have X meeting quarterly, whatever. I plan the whole calendar for the whole year in December for the next year. So December 23, I will do for 24 whole year. When you do that, you suddenly figure out that nothing is in your head. Everything is in the calendar and you see multiple free slots in your calendar. I feel because people don't use the repeat function and they don't put everything in the calendar and it's in the head, they already feel pressured saying, I don't have time, I have so many things to do. No, there are a lot of slots in your calendar which are free. You just have to put them in the calendar and use them. Very simple tip, Srikant, but I meet so many people who don't do it. And I'm shocked that such a simple tip people don't follow. So there are 27 things that I do in a week, for example, in my case. They're all there. And in spite of finishing 27 things, I have other 20 things to do. I can do it. There is a slot available in my calendar.
Mhm.
And I have visibility of. So these two things I would say. One is the delegation and enrolling other people, trusting other people to do your job. Obviously, very important. And secondly, just having a better management of your calendar then allows you to at least do double of what you're doing today.
Nice. Like you said, it might sound simple, but if you kind of do it, have that discipline, you will be surprised to see how much more you can accomplish as an individual. So if you're ready, we'll get started with the power of three round. So three routines that is unique to CJ.
My whole life is routine, man, because I'm so driven by calendar. Everything has a rhythm, everything has a routine. Like almost to a level where people might call me robo. Robo.
So calendar would be one routine. What else?
Calendar is the and that takes care of all the routines. So yoga is another routine. Like I'm a big fan of
Mm-hmm.
yoga. Every day, morning 6 o'clock I do
Mm-hmm.
routine. And walks after dinner. That's my favorite too. Me and my wife, that's our me time. So we go for a walk every day after.
What are the three things according to you is needed to thrive in a multicultural ecosystem?
Empathy. Empathy as in being aware of your own emotions and then being aware of these people's emotions also, how they behave, especially multicultural
Mm-hmm.
environment. Dubai multicultural, 200 nationalities. Empathy is super important because what works for you may not work for them. So that is one. Transparency. Secondly, as in you have to be transparent with people. If you start hiding information, deleting information, then sooner or later people find out, and then trust is an issue. So transparency is important, and have faith, man. There are good people in the world, so have faith, and you have the faith, you find them.
So, CJ, you'll always hear or see people asking, what advice would you give to your younger self? And I have a slight twist to that question. My question is, what advice would you give to your older self? The CJ 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, what would be telling the CJ of that era?
Share the learning.
Hmm.
Invest all your time when you're not actively busy in making money. Share a lot of time in spend a lot of time in sharing what you've learned. That would be my advice to the 10 year down the line CJ. So, yeah. So, one is be busy sharing your learnings with people. Second would be continue giving back to the society, as in terms of charity, in
Nice.
terms of time and energy. Money, a lot of people give. Time and energy is a shortage. We are doing it, but when you have a little bit more time on hand, you need to increase that. So that would be my advice, that don't forget to give your time and energy. Money is the easiest part. So that would be the second advice to the 10 years down the line, CJ. The third one is, difficult question, man. I didn't think about it. Thank you for asking because it made me think. Don't forget to express gratitude.
Nice.
Everything we have got in life, we should be, thankful for it. So 10 years down the line, I don't, even if I'm in a bad situation, even if let's say my health is not supporting, but this amazing journey that God has given us, we can't stop expressing gratitude just because we have a bad day or a bad health or a bad. So I would want to remind myself of, don't forget to express gratitude.
Very modest and humble of you, even after accomplished so much, to kind of go back to the roots of gratitude, going back to the roots of sharing your learning, doing something back to the community is something I'm sure just not all entrepreneurs, but everybody on this planet should kind of look for. Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure you love this question. What are your three book recommendations for all of our listeners?
Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. Then Good to Great by Jim Collins. Good book. And Atomic Habits. So I would say these three books are good. Good to go. And the fourth one, bonus one, is No Rules Rules, Netflix. I recently read it. Interesting book. I like it. I think it gives a different perspective. So people, I would recommend people to read.
Sure. You're a master networker, so this question should be easy for you. Three individuals whom you would love to have lunch or dinner with?
So I want to meet Jim Collins, the guy who wrote Success Principles, and so would love to have lunch with him. I would love to have lunch with Mr. Warren Buffett, simply because that's one area I have not explored, investing in markets and just investing and making money grow. So I would love to have a one-to-one meeting lunch with him given an opportunity. And the third one is Mr. Narendra Modi.
So, if I were to make a question on the fly, since you are a big advocate of learning and a avid learner for life, what are three concepts or three frameworks that has helped you in your journey? I'm sure there are many. If you were to just pick two or three, what would those three frameworks or concepts be like?
So I would say the concept of that everything that you are experiencing is a perception. It's not reality because it's your perception. That concept is very powerful in my opinion, like extremely powerful. Because the moment you say this is my perception, then many options open up. The moment you say this is what it is, that becomes the truth, that becomes the reality. Then you have only one choice. So accepting everything is that this is my perception, I think is a very, very powerful concept in NLP, that everything is your perception. So of the same situation, my perception and Shrikant's perception can be different. Just by acknowledging that, so many options open up. Second concept is about the topic of empathy. Because empathy, people think only putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. That's what the majority people understand that as. But I think empathy is also knowing your own emotions. So that only when you can handle yourself, you can get into the shoes of others and understand them. So that bit is not communicated in many lectures. I think people do talk a lot about empathy as in putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Yeah, but first is me. First is understand your own emotions, master it. How you behave in what situations, and then go and understand them as their behavior and why they behave the way they behave. That is very powerful. I think the two ways of them. And committed conversations is another concept. So, I'll give you an example. We have a call. You and me have a call. And we say we had a conversation. But whatever actionables we spoke has to be brought into the format of who, what, when. Because then only that action is going to produce the result. So as they say, the thought creates action, action creates result. On that lines, if we have a conversation and don't do anything about it, that's just a conversation. But when you walk out of that conversations with some commitment of who, what, when, I call it a WWW of the meeting. If you have the WWW of the meeting, that produces result, not the conversation. So I'm a big fan of conversations, but I want to add one more. I'm a big fan of committed conversations. Otherwise, conversation is just a waste of energy.
True. It kind of brings in meaning to those conversations. The quality of conversations will also get enhanced.
Quality of conversations, and at the end of the day, conversations needs to produce result, right? So there has to be a who, what, when. It needs to be bound by these three parameters. So it's like you said, you and me meet at a wedding and you say, I run a podcast. And CJ, one day I would like to have a podcast with you. That's just a conversation. But CJ, pull out your calendar. Let's look at a day in September. The first Saturday in September, that's a committed conversation. So suddenly now that action, because of that WWW, who, what, when, the podcast will happen. Because that conversation is now a committed conversation. So that concept, now I practice it in the office. So we've converted. Why am I saying this is because I also am a big promoter of that concept where I say that meeting minutes should be scrapped. Every meeting that we have in the office, only WWW table should be circulated.
Oh, what when?
And the meeting minutes are there on the cloud somewhere. If they want to refer, if they want to read, they are there, but they should never be circulated. Circulated is what do we want to do, who wants to do it, what they want to do it, when want that table. And so next meeting start with just looking at that table. That's it. And the company's overall growth will accelerate by just changing one thing in the meeting. Because you've been in a corporate environment, I've been in a SME environment, but meetings are a waste of time. Many meetings are a waste of time. So by having committed conversation, by using this www tool, the whole effectiveness of the meeting and in turn effectiveness of the organization will go up. That is my belief.
That's another piece that you can also look from a productivity standpoint. Your productivity will also enhance. So moving on, CJ, you have also played, like I have mentioned multiple times, a big role in building networks, building connections. You are the director of corporate connections. A bit about what corporate connection is all about. More importantly, how do you build relationship that lasts, that thrives? What has been your observation? What will be your ideas, recommendations for people to build those thriving relationships?
So a bit about, as you said, corporate connections. It's a global community of C-level executives who may feel lonely at the top. So we bring them in one room, we provide them the structure so that they become advisors for each other, like a peer advisor. They learn from each other and they also create opportunities for each other. And we do that globally. Currently, we are doing that in 30 countries, and I am doing that in United Arab Emirates. That's 30 seconds what corporate connection does. In the context of corporate connections, or even any other context, the second question was about how do we build relationships. One of the things I learned out of building a group of corporate connections is a word called servant leadership, where you really have to serve people for their interest, and you see that they automatically start following you. That's what my understanding of servant leadership is, that you're really serving them for their benefit, and that builds the strongest relationship. The other way to build the strongest relationship is to help them achieve what they want, because most of the relationships you see, they start with a premise of what's in it for me. Whereas the moment you shift the focus on them and say what's in it for them, that's a great beginning of a solid relationship. Because once you help them, assist them achieve what they want, every human being, they reciprocate. I have faith that everyone reciprocates. Some people take time to reciprocate, but as long as you get into a relationship with a faith that I'm going to help the other person achieve what he or she wants, so that ultimately they are going to reciprocate and help me achieve what I want. This premise is a great premise for a stronger relationship, I think.
So that's the givers gain philosophy as well.
Yeah, what goes around comes around.
As you kind of stressed upon building the strong relationship, there's also an element of this relationship which is about sustaining relationship. And you have very beautifully alluded that you're still friends with your past to past employers. Dilip is the name of one of your ex colleagues whom you have made friends and ultimately turned out to be business partners, right? And how do you bring this element of, it's just not about nurturing relationship, having a strong relationship, but also sustaining it?
So remembering them and keeping in touch with them, because everything requires a connection, right? So, and life is easy now because people I was connected with 15 years back are now on my Instagram, are on now my Facebook, are on my LinkedIn. It takes 30 seconds to wish them happy birthday. It takes, so just establishing that contact and keeping that contact with the old relationships makes you accessible when they need it and makes them accessible when you need it. So I think that's keeping in touch is one effort of keeping in touch, because naturally if you meet somebody on the road, it's called reactive, but making an effort to keep in touch is a proactive approach. So you have to move from a reactive, because reactive everybody does. When the apple falls on my lap, you discover gravity is reactive, but proactively looking out for it is important.
And since you're so structured in everything that you do, what's the structure around building great relationship?
knowing who you want to build relationships first, because you don't have to build every relationship. I'm not of that opinion. I personally speaking, I build relationships with people who give energy, not suck energy. So knowing who you want to, and everybody may have a different parameter of building relationships. There's no right or wrong here. So you need clarity of your parameter of building. And then once you build relationships, then understand that the quality of relationship depends on how selfish you are. The lesser selfish you are, the better is the quality of the relationship. So first understand what is the parameter of building, then understand the quality of the relationship. Two things are very important. And then third way is figure out to close the loop. How am I going to keep in touch and build on that relationship? So these 3 points are important. Knowing, then improving the quality by just not being always what's in it for me, what's in it for me. I call it self-orientation. I say lesser the self-orientation, higher is the quality of relation. And third is a structure to keep in touch.
But CJ, that's a wonderful way of looking at it. But cut it to the real world. In the real world, you don't build relationship saying that, okay, I don't have any expectation from you. While I would love to kind of build relationship without expectation, but the reality of it is we have somewhere the form a expectation coming out of it. It need not be translating to a deliverable or you be good because I'm good to kind of a stuff. But there is that inherent expectation built in. How do you kind of overcome that and still maintain that relationship, saying that I don't expect anything from CJ, but this is what I want to give to CJ as an example.
I think there is absolutely nothing wrong in having an expectation. And I totally agree that every relationship you start building, there is an expectation. It's how frequently is that expectation overtaking the effort of building relationship. That is important. So striking the balance, because you can't just be your expectations from that relationship. So then are you taking the efforts to understand what is the other person's benefit and other person's expectation? If you're willing to do that and if you're taking the efforts to do that, absolutely having expectations is a perfectly okay premise. I am not saying I'm sadhu sant and building only relationships. I have expectations, but in a relationship, am I equally giving importance to others? Am I also making sure that if we are meeting for 1 hour, I'm not only talking about me, I'm also finding out things of how I can help him in the balance 30 minutes and 30 minutes I'm talking about. Then you start achieving that right balance of it. That's where the relationship starts. So it's absolutely okay to start with having an expectation.
Mhm.
It's not allowing it to take over.
Okay, so starting at a point where we started this whole conversation, the boy from Bal Mohan Vidya Mandir to the man who is giving so much back to the world. Life has come a full circle. If you were to kind of reflect back as on date and say that, okay, this has been the biggest lesson, biggest gift that you've had in life, what would that be?
It's there on my website. Meeting right people is luck, but keeping them with you, just everything I have, or I think people around me have, is because they met the right people at the right time. They then made an effort, a proactive effort to keep these people with them. So that's one big lesson, and that's why that is on the homepage of my website. The line, you got it from the homepage of the website, right? It deserves that space. That's why it's been there on the homepage. So that's my biggest learning.
Wonderful. And this podcast is all about creating ripples of inspiration, CJ. Before we sign off, what is your Inspire Someone Today message to all the listeners?
So one message is have faith and jump in. Don't wait for things to get right. Don't make the whole plan today, because the plan keeps changing and the plan keeps developing as you start walking on the journey. I meet a lot of people who wait without action to make the plan better. I am not of that opinion. Have faith, have the energy, jump in, and start designing the plan on the way. That's my experience.
Wonderful. Take that leap of faith, jump in, make changes to the plan along the way. That's the message coming from Chirantan Joshi. Chirantan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and being on this episode of Inspire Someone today. Thank you for listening into today's edition of Inspire Someone today. It's been a privilege to bring in these conversations. If you like this episode and have any feedback or comments, do mail me at inspiresomeonetodaypodcast@gmail.com. Inspiring someone is like creating ripples around us. If you like what to listen, feel free to share them and let's create ripples of inspiration. Do not forget to follow me on my Instagram handle @InspireSomeoneTodayPodcast for all the latest updates. This is Srikanth, your host, signing off, and until next time, keep inspiring.